She yelled he's innocent in court, not knowing he was the mafia boss. The air in Kings County Courthouse was stale, smelling of old varnish and circulated anxiety. It was a place where futures were ground down to plea bargains, where justice was a slow, bureaucratic grind. Then the silence shattered. "He's innocent." The words ripped through the room. Rain Alvarez, assigned counsel, was on her feet, her knuckles white on the defense table. Her voice was not the measured tone of a public defender. It was raw, unfiltered conviction. The jury flinched. The court reporter's fingers froze over the keys. Even the judge, a man who had seen decades of Brooklyn's worst, looked momentarily stunned. Her client, Noah Velez, just looked tired. He was a delivery driver, barely old enough to rent a car, now swallowed by a suit 2 sizes too big. The state claimed he'd torched a warehouse down by the docks at Pier 47B. The evidence was smoke, thin and vague. Rain's eyes scanned the room, adrenaline surging, before landing on the gallery. In the 3rd row, Silas March sat observing. His presence was a quiet weight in the restless room. March was Brooklyn royalty, but the new kind, the kind built on philanthropic foundations and charter school scholarships. He funded the very program that had paid for Rain's law school textbooks. To Rain, he was an anchor, a community benefactor. He watched the proceedings with a placid, almost academic interest. His gaze focused intensely on her. Rain turned back to the prosecutor, who was sputtering objections. She ignored him, addressing the bench, her voice leveling but losing none of its fire. "Your Honor, the prosecution's timeline is impossible." She strode to the evidence board, the click of her heels sharp and precise. "The state's key witness claims my client was at the pier at 10:04 p.m., but the toll data we subpoenaed the prosecution failed to examine shows Mr. Velez crossing the Verrazano at 9:52 p.m. She paused, letting the geography sink in. He would have needed a helicopter, not a delivery van, to make that trip in 12 minutes. It is physically impossible. She moved to the second board, a diagram of the pier, and then we have the camera footage, or rather, the lack of it. She pointed to the diagram. The prosecution conveniently provided footage from camera 7 and camera 9, but camera 8, the only one with a direct view of the warehouse entrance, suffered a signal interruption. She made air quotes, her disgust palpable. A signal interruption that began exactly 2 minutes before the fire was reported and ended exactly 10 minutes after, a 12-minute gap. She looked at the jury, her voice dropping but cutting deeper. "That is not a glitch. That is a blind spot someone created. Noah Velez is not an arsonist. He is the scapegoat." "Recess," the judge barked, slamming his gavel, his face flushed. "Counsel will approach." The room exploded. Reporters bolted for the hallway, desperate for the first quote from the public defender who had just accused the DA's office of fabricating a case. Rain gathered her legal pads, her hands shaking slightly now that the adrenaline was ebbing. A court officer intercepted her before the media scrum could. "Miss Alvarez." He handed her a small, stiff card. It was matte black, impossibly heavy. There was no name, no number, just a single embossed silver hawk, its wings spread. Before she could process it, a shadow fell over her. That was remarkable. "Miss Alvarez." Rain looked up. Silas March, up close. He was taller than he appeared in the society pages. His suit was charcoal gray, perfect, understated. His voice was deep and smooth, like aged whiskey. "And Mr. March." She was flustered, caught off guard. He extended his hand. "Your defense of the vulnerable is courageous. Brooklyn needs more advocates like you." Rain took his hand. It was warm, the grip firm and dry. But as their palms met, something electric shot up her arm, a static shock that prickled her skin. It was a bizarre, contradictory feeling. His grip felt like a shield, utterly secure. Yet his eyes were not just pleasant, they were analytical. They swept over her face, cataloging, assessing. It was the look of a man who missed nothing. It was the gaze of a predator, cloaked in the calm of a philanthropist. It felt like safety and danger wrapped in one handshake. "Thank you, sir. I'm just trying to do my job." He held her gaze a moment longer than necessary. "You do it very well." He released her hand, the sensation lingering. Rain finally broke free of the courthouse, the black card heavy in her pocket. The afternoon air was humid. She pulled her hair back, her mind already racing on the next motion to file. Across the street, parked near the bodega, a black SUV with tinted windows sat idling. It pulled out slowly, keeping pace 2 car lengths behind her as she walked toward the subway. Further down the block, Silas March exited the courthouse, flanked by a driver. He declined to speak to the remaining reporters and slipped into a different black SUV. It, too, pulled into traffic, heading the opposite direction, toward the Brooklyn Bridge, and behind it, maintaining a precise, professional distance, followed another vehicle, unmarked and unseen by the man it shadowed. Rain was halfway down the steps of Borough Hall when a man in a rumpled suit blocked her path. He looked like he lived on bad coffee and stakeouts. "Rain Alvarez." It was not a question. She stopped. "Who are you?" He flashed a badge so quickly she only caught the lettering. "Agent Kincaid, North Star Organized Crime Bureau." Rain bristled. "NOCB, this is a state-level arson case. You're federal." Kincaid stepped closer, lowering his voice. The smell of stale cigarettes wafted off him. "You did good work in there, counselor. Too good." He motioned back toward the court. "You think you're defending a delivery driver." "I am defending a delivery driver." "No." Kincaid's eyes were flat. "You're crashing the wrong chessboard. That warehouse was not just a warehouse, and your client is not just a driver. You're loud. Loud gets people hurt." "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means walk away. Let the state handle it. Take the plea they're about to offer." Rain stared at him, offense replacing her confusion. "My client is innocent. I don't walk away." She pushed past him, descending into the noise of the subway. Kincaid did not follow. Rain Alvarez slotted her Metro card, her resolve hardening into steel. She ignored the warning. She ignored the strange current from Silas March's handshake. She ignored the silver hawk in her pocket. She was going to save Noah Velez. She had no idea that her shout in the courtroom had not just saved a client, it had rung a bell in the deepest, darkest parts of the city, and the shadows were already turning to see who had dared to ring it. The rain against the windows of her Greenpoint apartment was a relentless drum against the city's hum. Rain's small kitchen table was covered in a chaotic spread of legal pads, the ink bleeding slightly from the humidity. The courtroom high had dissolved hours ago, leaving a residue of cold, vibrating tension. Her mind kept snagging on a single fact: the warehouse at Pier 47B. It was listed in Discovery as a low-value storage facility for surplus textiles. Yet 48 hours before the fire, its insurance policy had been upgraded to a disaster-level plan, covering catastrophic loss. You do not buy a hurricane policy for a shed full of rags. It was not just arson, it was a scheduled demolition, financed by an insurance payout. Her phone vibrated, skittering across the wood table. An unknown number. A single line of text: "Don't ask any more questions about Pier 47B." Her blood ran cold. Below the text was a photograph. It was her stepping off the curb outside the courthouse that afternoon, her hair blowing across her face. The angle was high. From a window across the street, the black SUV she had seen, they were not just watching the case, they were watching her. She deleted the message, but the image was burned into her mind. She needed Jessa. The diner was cramped, smelling of stale coffee and bacon grease, but it was safe. Jessa Monroe, her oldest friend and the investigative engine behind the Brooklyn Below podcast, was already in a back booth, headphones draped around her neck. "You look like you just saw a ghost," Jessa said, not looking up from her laptop. "Worse. I saw a setup." Rain slid the insurance policy printout across the table. "And then I got this." She described the text message and the photo. Jessa's eyes, usually tired, sharpened with a journalistic hunger. A prepaid bonfire, Lovely, who owns the warehouse? A shell company. Silverline Holdings, untraceable, of course. Silverline, Jessa murmured, her fingers flying across the keys. I'll run it through the databases. See what shell it's nesting in. You're sure Noah is clean? He's clean, Rain said, the conviction returning. But what he got caught in is absolutely filthy. We need a drink, Jessa declared, snapping the laptop shut. And I know where we can listen. The bar was a basement dive near the Navy Yard, a place where dock workers and union reps drank cheap whiskey and spoke in low voices. The air was thick with the smell of damp concrete and stale beer. Rain nursed a club soda, feeling exposed in her court clothes. In the booth behind them, shielded by the noise of a jukebox, two men in heavy jackets were talking. No, the whole system is soft now. They just push the blind container through. What's blind? The other asked. Inspector gets a donation. The seal number on the log is mismatched. The truck rolls out heavy, easy money. Rain and Jessa exchanged a look. A compromised inspection system. A way to move anything through the port, completely off the books. They left the bar and stepped into a sudden deluge. The rain, which had been a drizzle, was now a cold, horizontal sheet. A blind container, Rain muttered, pulling her collar tight. If Noah was assigned that pier, maybe he was just... A sound tore through the rain, a high-pitched engine whine, a motorcycle. It was not on the street, it was on the sidewalk, bearing down on them. Before Rain could even turn, a gloved hand grabbed the strap of her file bag. The force ripped it from her shoulder, spinning her off balance. She cried out, stumbling against the brick wall. Hey, Jessa yelled, lunging forward. The bike skidded on the wet pavement, the rider struggling to turn and flee. Tires screamed. A black sedan, sleek and silent, slid perfectly into the space between the motorcycle and the street, blocking the escape route. It did not hit the bike, it simply occupied the space, a masterful, precise maneuver. The thief, panicked and trapped, abandoned the bike, dropped the bag, and sprinted down a narrow alley. The back door of the sedan opened. Silas March emerged, holding a large, black umbrella. He moved with an unsettling, fluid grace, utterly unbothered by the rain or the sudden violence. His driver, a broad man with the placid face of a professional killer, was already back in the car, the engine idling. Miss Alvarez, are you hurt? His voice was the same deep calm from the courthouse. Rain was shaking, soaked to the bone. No, I don't think so. She bent to check her pocket, pulling out her phone. The screen was shattered, the device dead from the impact. Damn it. Silas retrieved her file bag from the pavement, the leather already dark with rain, and handed it to her. This is not a night to be walking, he said, holding the umbrella over her, shielding her from the storm. Please allow my driver to see you home safely. Your friend as well. It was not a request. It was a polite, reasonable command. Rain hesitated, the federal agent's warning flashing in her mind. You're crashing the wrong chessboard, but she was cold. Her phone was broken, and the alley the thief had fled down looked impossibly dark. All right, Rain said. Jessa gave her a sharp, questioning look, but climbed into the front seat. Rain slid into the back, onto the plush leather. The car was silent, insulated from the storm outside. It smelled warm, expensive, a subtle scent of rich leather and dry oak, after dropping a very skeptical Jessa at her building. The car moved silently through the rain-slicked streets toward Greenpoint. The partition between them and the driver was raised. You seem to attract trouble tonight, Miss Alvarez, Silas observed, his gaze fixed on the passing city lights. It seems so. You live near McGolrick Park, I believe. Rain stiffened. How did you know that? I'm on the board for the park's restoration fund, he replied easily. It's a beautiful, quiet neighborhood, usually. He turned his gaze on her. The ambient light of the street lamps caught the planes of his face. You're close with Miss Monroe. You work together often. We're old friends. It's good to have friends you trust. He paused. It must be difficult. The work you do, the public defender's office is criminally underfunded. You must find yourself relying on your own resources quite often. Rain realized what he was doing. The questions were not small talk. They were data points. He was mapping her. He knew her neighborhood, her closest confidant, her professional vulnerabilities. The questions were soft, but the intent behind them was steel. The car slid to a halt in front of her brownstone. The driver opened his door, but Silas motioned him to stay, taking the umbrella himself. He walked her to the recessed stone entryway, the sound of the rain echoing in the small space. He stood close, holding the umbrella over her head even though they were already shielded from the worst of the storm. The silence stretched, filled only by the hiss of tires on the wet street. He was simply looking at her, that same analytical gaze from the courthouse, but it was softer now, mixed with something else. Curiosity. Rain felt the static current again, the warmth rolling off him. "Thank you for the ride, Mr. March," she broke the silence, needing to reclaim the air. "I can get home from here." His lips quirked in a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. "I have no doubt of that." He held her gaze for 1 second longer, then dipped his head, a gesture that was almost formal. He turned and walked back to the car, disappearing inside. Rain fumbled for her keys, her fingers numb. As the sedan pulled away, its taillights vanishing into the rain, she slipped inside her building. The hallway was cold, but the air around her still seemed to hold a faint, lingering trace of his presence, warm leather and dry oak. Across the street, on the flat roof of the warehouse opposite her building, a figure lay prone, hidden behind a ventilation unit. The rain had stopped. A small red dot of light flickered as the man checked his rangefinder, measuring the distance to the exact spot on the curb where Silas March had just been standing. He noted the pause, the way the benefactor had looked at the lawyer. He made a note, satisfied, then melted back into the shadows of the roof, unseen. The digital trail for Silverline Holdings was a series of nesting dolls, each shell company registered in a different state, but they all paid utilities from one account, and that account led Rain to a single, obscure city office, the Bureau of Maritime Compliance, East River Desk. It was a dusty, forgotten corner of Port Authority bureaucracy. Rain, flashing her public defender's ID with more confidence than she felt, navigated the maze of gray cubicles. She found the personnel supervisor, a woman weary from 30 years of civil service. "I'm reviewing a case tied to Pier 47B, Rain said, projecting polite authority. "I just need to verify some inspection schedules from the night of the fire." 47B, the woman sighed, typing. "Everything there is a mess. All those files are frozen." "I understand," Rain pressed gently. "I'm just checking the inspector who was on duty that week, a Mr. Gregor Kopechny." The supervisor's eyes flickered. "Kopechny. Yeah, he went on leave, effective the day after the fire. A leave of absence. Unpaid, indefinite, personal reasons." The woman's tone said it all. It was a sudden, clean break, a man who knew when to vanish. Rain's phone buzzed, a text from Jessa. "Got the manifest. You need to see this." They met back at the diner, Jessa's laptop glowing in the dim booth. The container Noah Velez was supposedly moving was logged as dried agricultural goods from Valparra, Jessa said, pointing to the screen. "But look at the seal numbers." Rain leaned in. The numbers were not sequential. They were a repeating pattern, AX47, BX47B. "That's not a seal number," Rain whispered. "That's the pier, Pier 47B. "It's a flag," Jessa said, her eyes bright. "A signal to whoever was waiting at the port. This is the blind container the guys in the bar were talking about. This one is special. This one doesn't get opened." The next day, Rain visited Noah Velez at the detention center. The visiting room was loud, the air sour. Noah looked smaller, paler. "Rain, you gotta get me out," Wasati pleaded, his voice cracking. "I'm working on it, Noah, but I need you to be 100% honest with me. Who hired you?" I told you, it was a dispatch call. No, Rain said, her voice firm but kind. No more scripts. Who really gave you the order? Noah's eyes darted to the guard, then back. He leaned in, his voice barely audible. It's not a company. It's a guy. We just know him as Night Crow. He sends a text, tells you where to be. You move the pallets, you drop the truck, and you find an envelope of cash in your glove box. You don't ask questions. Night Crow, Rain repeated, filing the name away. I just drove to Pier 47B, Noah insisted, his fear palpable. I moved the pallets. That's all. I swear. Back in her office, Rain hit another wall. She cross-referenced the mobile ID from Noah's delivery truck with the toll data. The toll data she had used in court, the data that proved his alibi was valid. But the truck itself, according to its own internal GPS log, had never left his depot in Queens. They spoofed his plates, she said aloud to the empty room. Someone had put Noah's license plate onto a different truck, the one that crossed the Verrazano. They had manufactured a perfect ironclad alibi for him. They had not just framed him, they had framed him and then, bizarrely, given his lawyer the exact tool to get him off. It was a setup within a setup. They wanted a loud, messy trial. Exhausted, she opened her email. Her inbox was full of junk, pleas from other clients, and one new message from an anonymous server. The subject line was blank. The body had one sentence. If you want to save Noah, ask the March and Vale Foundation about the ship Mercy Dawn. The March and Vale Foundation. Silas. Rain's heart hammered. The coincidence was too great. The rescue in the rain. The probing questions. He was not just a benefactor. He was a player. The Foundation's headquarters was a glass and steel monolith in Dumbo, a testament to new money and civic virtue. The lobby was quiet, serene, featuring a massive, backlit photograph of a cargo ship on the open ocean. I'm here to see Mr. March, Rain said to the receptionist. He and I spoke yesterday. Mr. March is in a board meeting, but you're welcome to wait, the receptionist said with polished courtesy. Rain wandered the lobby, pretending to admire the architecture, her mind racing. Her eyes landed on a wall of donor plaques and photographs, children in hospital beds, ribbon-cutting ceremonies, and then a photo from a fundraising gala, a smiling Silas March, shaking hands with a man Rain recognized instantly. It was Gregor Kopechny, the port inspector who had vanished. Miss Alvarez, an unexpected pleasure. Silas was walking toward her, that same effortless calm radiating from him. He wore a simple button-down shirt, no tie. The sleeves rolled up. He looked more like an architect than a philanthropist. Mr. March, I was in the neighborhood. It was a weak lie, and they both knew it. My office, he jested, not waiting for an answer. His office was a corner suite with a staggering view of the Manhattan skyline. What can I do for you, counselor? Rain decided on a direct assault. The Mercy Dawn, what is it? Silas did not blink. He walked to the window, looking out at the city. It's a medical relief ship, part of a new initiative. He turned back to her, his expression open, sincere. We are quietly funding aid into a disputed territory in Valparaiso. The government there has blocked humanitarian corridors. We use the Mercy Dawn to get supplies in. Off the books. It's necessary, but politically complicated. I would hate for the Foundation's name to be used to justify a war-torn regime's blockade. Valparaiso, the same country as the dried agricultural goods, it was a plausible, even noble, explanation. And Gregor Kopechny, Rain asked, her voice sharp. I saw the photo in your lobby. You're shaking hands with the port inspector who conveniently went on leave the day after the Pier 47B fire. Silas's expression hardened, just slightly. Gregor was an old partner, from my logistics days, long before the Foundation. We worked on the first relief shipments together. He paused, choosing his words. I'm not involved in his new career choices. People change. Miss Alvarez. That's a very clean answer, Rain said, not hiding her skepticism. It has the virtue of being the truth. His gaze was steady, unwavering. Rain left the building, her mind spinning. The story was perfect, too perfect. It explained everything while revealing nothing. She was halfway across the plaza when a voice called her name. "Miss Alvarez, a word." A woman in a severe black suit stepped out from behind a pillar. She was tall, sharp-featured, and her eyes were a cold, piercing gray. It was not the rumpled agent from the courthouse steps. This woman was in charge. "Agent Mara Kincaid," the woman said, flashing her NOCB badge. "We need to talk. Not here." She led Rain to an unmarked car. Inside, she handed Rain a slim, blue file. "You're asking good questions. Counselor, you're just asking the wrong person." Rain opened the file. The first page was a surveillance photo of Silas March, stepping out of the same black sedan that had driven her home. The next page was a complex organizational chart. At the very top, in a red box, was a name, the Violet Syndicate, and branching directly from it, a single name, Silas March. "I don't understand," Rain whispered, the blood draining from her face. "The Violet Syndicate is not a gang. Miss Alvarez. It's a corporation. They don't deal in street corners. They deal in global logistics, financial markets, and port authorities. They are the most sophisticated criminal enterprise we have ever tracked, and Silas March is its founder and head." Rain stared at the photo. The philanthropist, the benefactor, the man who had held the umbrella for her. "The fire at Pier 47B," Kincaid said, her voice devoid of emotion, "was not arson. It was a hostile takeover, a message, and your client, Noah Velez, was the post-it note they stuck to the bomb." Rain's vision tunneled. She felt sick. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Her client was a pawn. The entire trial was a distraction, and the man she had felt that strange, dangerous current from, he was the king. She thought of her shout in the courtroom, "He's innocent!" She had been right. Noah was innocent, but her shout had not just been a defense. It had been an interruption. She had not been protecting Noah Velez from the state. She had been protecting Silas March's chess piece from being cleared off the board too soon. The Paladin Athenaeum was not a public library. It was a private institution, a fortress of old money and endowed silence. Rain Alvarez, in her public defender's suit, was an anomaly. The air inside was still, heavy with the sweet, dry scent of aging paper and mahogany. Light from the green-shaded reading lamps cast pools of warm yellow, illuminating floating dust motes like tiny, suspended stars. She found him in the cartography wing, a section of the library he had personally funded the restoration of. He was alone, standing before a massive, glass-topped table, examining an ancient map of the 5 boroughs. He did not seem surprised to see her. He simply looked up as she approached, his expression placid. Rain did not wait. The NOCB file felt like it was burning a hole in her memory. "You're him," she said. Her voice was too loud, a violation of the sacred quiet. Silas March slowly folded his hands in front of him. He did not feign confusion. "You'll have to be more specific. Miss Alvarez." "Don't," she snapped, her voice low and trembling with rage. "Don't play games with me. Not here. Not after you sat in that gallery and watched me. You're Violet. You're the head of the Violet Syndicate." He looked at her, his gaze steady. He did not deny it. "I'm a result of this city. Rain. I am what Brooklyn required." "That's a meaningless, arrogant answer. You used me. You used my client, a terrified kid, as a pawn." "I watched you do your job," he corrected her, his voice retaining its measured calm. "And you did it brilliantly. You saw the holes in the state's case because they were meant to be seen. You planted the alibi," she accused, "the spoofed plates, the toll data. You framed Noah, and then you gave me the keys to unlock him. Why to what end?" "You're angry because you have a piece of the puzzle," Silas said, finally turning from the map to face her fully. "Let me give you another. The container Noah Velez was scheduled to move, it wasn't mine." Rain paused, the accusation freezing on her lips. "What?" It belonged to the Riverton Union, my competition, as your NOCB file surely labeled them. He stepped away from the table, closing the distance between them. But they are not my competition. They are a plague. Riverton isn't interested in logistics or influence. They are interested in addiction. He stopped just beyond arm's reach. The manifest was real. Dried agricultural goods from Valpara, but inside that powder was fentanyl. Thousands of pounds of it, pressed, packaged, and ready to be disguised as nutritional supplements for relief organizations. They were attempting to use my legitimate shipping lanes to piggyback their poison into the city. Rain's mind raced, connecting the dots. The fire, Silas said, was a blockade. Riverton knew NOCB was getting close. They couldn't risk moving the container, but they couldn't risk it being opened during a random inspection either. So they arranged for the warehouse to burn, an arson, designed to destroy the evidence before anyone could look inside. And Noah, she whispered, the horror dawning. Noah Velez was the convenient suspect. The driver scheduled for the pickup. Riverton needed a body to throw to the state. Someone to make the fire look like a low-level crime, not a cartel maneuver. They framed him to cover their tracks. Rain leaned against a bookshelf, the sharp edge of the wood digging into her back. And you knew. You knew all this. You let them frame him. And you put that fake alibi in my lap. Why? Because, Silas said, I needed the container's existence to become public record. I needed the compromised inspection, the signal interruption at camera 8, all of it, to be entered into a court transcript, but I needed it to come from an unimpeachable source, from a public defender fighting for an innocent man. I needed it to come from you. You built the foundation of the case that will destroy them. She stared at him, repulsed and terrifyingly fascinated. He had used her ideals, her very voice, as a weapon in his own war. The situation remains, he continued, pressing his advantage. Riverton is not defeated. They have other shipments, other routes. NOCB is chasing me. The ghost. While the real poison is minutes from the street, you want to save Noah Velez? I want to destroy Riverton. We, Miss Alvarez, want the exact same result. Rain straightened up, finding her footing. And what do you want from me to coordinate? You want me to ignore the fact that you are the Violet Syndicate. I want you to expose a fentanyl ring, save your client from a life sentence, and accept that the world is not as clean as this library. He paused, his gaze intense. In return, yes, you look the other way. You overlook the methods I must use to ensure Riverton is permanently dismantled. I will not absolve you, Rain said, her voice shaking with the moral weight of it. I will not launder your crimes. I am an officer of the court. I am not asking for absolution, Silas countered, his voice smooth as velvet. I'm offering a result. You can stand here, in this temple of knowledge, and hold on to your ethics. Or you can step outside and actually save your client. In this city, you rarely get to do both. The pressure was suffocating. She thought of the call she had received just an hour ago from Agent Mara Kincaid. We know you've been digging, counselor. We need you to cooperate. Get March. If you don't help the state, we will be forced to have Mr. Velez's case reassigned to an attorney who will... They were going to take Noah from her. NOCB would bury him to get to Silas. Silas was offering to free him if she compromised her soul. She was trapped in an impossible vice. Silas saw the conflict warring on her face. He stepped closer, invading her space. Though he did not touch her, the air between them was electric, charged with his proximity, the faint, clean scent of wool and old paper. Rain. He spoke her name, and the sound resonated deep in her chest. In that courtroom, you yelled, "He's innocent," because you felt it. You saw the truth through the smoke and the state's bad evidence. You trusted your gut. He lowered his voice, forcing her to lean in, capturing her in his orbit. Kincaid and the NOCB are blinding you with a badge and a file. I am showing you the real monster. Do not let them blind you now. Trust what you see. It was too much. The certainty in his voice was more compelling than Kincaid's threats, and that scared her more than anything. She turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing too loudly on the polished floor. "Stay away from me," she managed, her voice tight. Rain pushed open the heavy oak doors and stumbled out into the cool night air, gasping as if she had been underwater. Her mind, the logical, legal part of her, screamed no. It was a compromise she could never make. It was unethical. It was a crime. But her heart, the part that had seen the desperation in Noah's eyes and the cold, manipulative calculation in Kincaid's, felt the terrifying pull of the gray. She was standing on the line, and Silas March was daring her to cross it. The warrant was paper thin, but it was paper. Rain had found an archaic administrative code violation, improper hazardous material manifests from 3 years prior. It was enough for a limited hour's inspection. Lieutenant Bram, a port officer Rain knew from an old pro bono case, met them at the fence. Bram was a man drowning in a compromised apartment. He was their key. "It's quiet," Jessa whispered, pulling the collar of her rain jacket tight. Too quiet. The rain slicked the asphalt, turning the cargo yard into a black mirror. "The cameras are on," Bram said, checking a small, handheld monitor. "But Rain, you were right. They're looping. Look." He pointed to the screen. A seagull was stuck in a perpetual 3-second flight. "The red light is on, but the feed is dead. This is evidence tampering, clear as day." They moved past stacks of silent containers, the metallic tang of the ocean mixed with rust. Rain clutched her burner phone, Jessa a portable hard drive and audio recorder. They were walking into the heart of the setup. They rounded the corner of A block, heading for the container marked with the repeating seal number AX47B, and froze. Shadows detached themselves from the containers. 4 men, 5, all in black, masked, moving with a silent, synchronized efficiency that was terrifying. They were not Riverton thugs. They were soldiers. Bram's hand went to his service weapon. "Port Authority, do not move." A 6th figure stepped out of the darkness, unmasked, Silas March. He looked completely composed, as if he were attending an opera. "Lieutenant, please," Silas said, his voice cutting through the rain. "If you raise that, my men will disarm you, and I need you conscious." "Silas," Rain breathed, a mix of fury and fear, "you followed us." "I was here first," he corrected. He looked at Bram, then at Rain. "If you had come here alone, Counselor, Riverton would have put a bullet in you before you saw the camera loop. If you had come with NOCB, a firefight would have erupted. You came tonight, so you get to live. Now, if you're finished, we have work to do." One of his men produced a set of industrial bolt cutters and snapped the heavy seal on the target container. The heavy doors groaned open. The smell hit first a sickly sweet chemical powder. The container was filled with large white sacks labeled Valpara Nutritional Supplement, Project Mercy. Jessa was already working, her recorder on logging container seal. Time is 0200. Rain stepped inside, her phone's video light cutting the dark. She tore open one of the sacks with a pocket knife. White powder spilled out, just like he said. "Look deeper," Silas said from the doorway. Rain plunged her hand into the powder. Her fingers hit something hard. She pulled it out, a plastic-wrapped brick of chalk white, densely pressed pills. "My God," Jessa whispered. Rain filmed it all. The outer bags, the inner bricks, the lot numbers. "We have enough," Rain said, backing out. "Bram, we have enough to seize." "No," Silas said. A high-beam blast flooded the yard. 2 heavy-duty SUVs were speeding toward them, barreling through the unsecured main gate. Riverton. "Jessa, dump the footage to the drive, now," Rain yelled. Silas was already moving. "Tactics! Blind the lights! Blind the signal!" One of his men raised a device, and Jessa's phone, which had been connecting to a local hotspot, went dead. Signal jammed. Another of Silas's men aimed a military-grade strobe at the approaching vehicles, pulsing a light so bright it was disorienting. The lead SUV swerved, momentarily blind. "The water," Silas commanded. "Go." They ran, not back to the gate, but toward the dark expanse of Newtown Creek. Silas's team was already pulling the cover off a low-profile service skiff tied at an abandoned dock. They piled in, Jessa clutching the hard drive, Rain's heart pounding so hard it hurt. The boat's engine roared to life, a low-throated growl, and they shot out onto the black, chemical-slick water. Lights appeared behind them, a larger pursuit boat. Riverton was prepared. The sharp crack of a gunshot split the night, then another. Rain screamed as the zip of a bullet passed where her head had been a second before. "Get down," Bram yelled, pushing her and Jessa flat. A bullet ricocheted off the boat's console. Bram grunted, a sharp intake of breath. "I'm hit," he said, his voice tight with pain. Rain looked. His sleeve was darkening, a graze along his forearm, bleeding heavily. Before Rain could react, Silas was there. He shoved Bram down behind the console, pushing him out of the line of fire. "Pressure," Silas ordered. He ripped off his own tailored jacket, a piece of clothing that likely cost more than Rain's monthly salary, and shoved it against the wound. "Hold this. Hold it tight." Rain stared. The devil. Tending to a wound, the man who orchestrated this chaos was simultaneously stopping the bleeding. The image short-circuited her brain. Silas grabbed the wheel, spinning the boat hard to starboard, aiming for a dark, overgrown inlet Rain had not even seen. They slid into a narrow channel, branches scraping the hull, and emerged into a concrete basin hidden beneath a collapsing, ancient cold storage warehouse. Silas cut the engine. They heard the larger boat roar past the inlet, continuing down the creek. They were in near total blackness. The air was frigid, smelling of ammonia and decay. "We're clear," one of his men whispered. Silas did not relax. He moved to the warehouse wall, found the ancient electrical panel, and smashed the glass with his elbow. He gripped the main breakers and ripped them downward. The few remaining emergency lights in the facility died, plunging them into absolute, suffocating darkness. "My team is gone," Silas said, his voice a disembodied presence. "They will create a diversion to the south. You three will exit through the drainage culvert on the north wall. It will put you out 3 blocks away." Rain could feel him move close to her. She felt the warmth of him before she saw his shape. Rain. She felt something small and cold press into her palm. Her fingers closed around it. It was metal. The silver hawk. The same as the one from the black card. "What is this?" "A key," he said. "When you find a door that will not open, show them this. They will know who sent you." Before she could ask what that meant, he was gone. He did not make a sound. He did not fade into the shadows. He simply ceased to be there. "Come on," Jessa urged, pulling her arm. "Bram needs a medic. Let's find that drain." Rain clutched the hard drive in one hand and the cold, silver hawk in the other, and ran. The harbor line was a flat-roofed, 10-story box of brick and glass overlooking the BQE, a place so perfectly anonymous no one would ever look for them there. In a room smelling of industrial carpet cleaner, Jessa finished the final data transfer. 3 encrypted hard drives. "This is dynamite, Rain," Jessa said, sliding one drive into an anti-static bag. "Bram is stable, by the way. His union rep is already spinning a story about a dock accident. He's safe." "Good." Rain's voice was hollow. She was still vibrating from the chase. "I'm taking this copy to the paper's First Amendment lawyer. It goes into a legal safe. If anything happens to us, this whole thing blows up. Stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." Jessa left, and the silence of the room became suffocating. Rain couldn't breathe. She unlocked the door and took the stairs to the roof. The city spread out below, a glittering, indifferent web. The rain had passed, leaving the air sharp and cold. The wind up here was fierce, whipping her hair across her face, stinging her cheeks. It felt good. It felt real. washing away the smell of the creek and the metallic tang of fear. She gripped the concrete parapet, her knuckles white, just trying to feel solid ground beneath her feet. She heard the stairwell door scrape open, but she did not turn. She did not have to. Silas March stepped onto the roof. He was alone. His hair was damp, plastered to his forehead by the rain. He was just in his shirt sleeves, the material soaked and clinging to him. Having given his jacket to Bram, his right wrist was raw, a dark, bruised scrape across the back of his hand where he had smashed the electrical box. They stood in silence for a long minute, separated by 10 feet of wet roofing tar. The argument from the library, the posturing, the threats, all of it felt like it had happened a lifetime ago. There was nothing left to say. They had been shot at together. They had seen the enemy. The air between them was raw, stripped of pretense, filled only with the sharp wind and the ragged echo of their breathing. He took a slow step toward her, then another. He stopped just in front of her, so close she could feel the heat coming off him, warring with the cold. His eyes were not the calm, analytical gaze of the philanthropist. They were dark, exhausted, and fixed on her with an unguarded intensity that stole her breath. He raised his left hand, the uninjured one. He did not touch her. Not yet. He held it suspended for a second. A silent question. "May I?" Rain's heart hammered against her ribs. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. That was all the permission he needed. His fingers, warm despite the cold, brushed the wind-whipped hair from her cheek. He cupped her jaw, his thumb stroking the bone, his gaze searching hers. Rain felt her defenses, the righteous anger, the legal barriers, all dissolve. She was not a lawyer. He was not a mafia boss. They were just two people who had survived the night. She took the final half step, closing the space, and rose up. The kiss was not what she expected. It was not rough, or claiming, or full of the violence they had just escaped. It was slow. It was deep. It was, more than anything, a confirmation. It was the taste of the cold night air, the faint, clean scent of him, and the desperate, shared relief of being alive. His hand slid from her jaw to the small of her back, a solid, grounding pressure. He held her steady as the wind gusted, pulling her flush against him. She felt the solid, tense muscles of his chest, the rapid, heavy beat of his heart matching her own. Her hands, acting of their own accord, found their way up, her fingers threading into the damp hair at the nape of his neck. She felt the coiled tension in his shoulders finally begin to release under her touch. He broke the kiss, but only just. They rested their foreheads together, shielded against the wind by the parapet wall. Their eyes were closed. The city sounds a distant siren. The rumble of the highway were a dull roar far below them. "I don't deserve this," he whispered, his voice rough, "but I want it." Rain opened her eyes, looking at the man inches from her, the man who had used her, but who had also saved her, the man who had stopped the bleeding. "I'm not saving a devil," she said, her voice quiet but firm, making him meet her gaze. "I'm choosing the man who is trying to stop a different evil." Their eyes held. It was not absolution. It was an agreement, an honest, terrible, necessary truce. He leaned in again, and this time the kiss was warmer, surer. It was a promise, a shared secret in the dark. It lingered, a slow burn of understanding. Before he consciously pulled back, he had crossed a line, but he would not destroy it. He stepped away, leaving the cold to rush back in. He was shivering slightly now, the wind cutting through his wet shirt. He had come with a dry overcoat, which he'd left by the door. He retrieved it and, without a word, draped it over Rain's shoulders. It was heavy, warm from his body, and smelled of oak and leather. He squeezed her shoulder, a brief, possessive, and yet gentle gesture. A small, tired smile touched his lips. Rain, pulling the coat tighter, found herself smiling back. It was a fragile, fleeting thing. That silent, shared moment on the roof, suspended between the chase and the dawn, bound them together in a way no words or laws ever could. The spell shattered. A vibration against her ribs. Her burner phone. Rain pulled it from her pocket, her hand shaking. A text from an unknown number. Noah Velez is being transferred. State holding. Pending security review. Another text came in immediately after. It was Kincaid. You, me, my office, 0700. You will not like what happens if you are late. The NOCB office at 7 a.m. sharp was a sterile box of gray carpet and fluorescent light. The air tasted like burnt coffee and bureaucratic indifference. Agent Mara Kincaid sat behind a steel desk, a thin file centered perfectly on her blotter. She did not look up when Rain entered. "You're late," Kincaid said. "I was securing my client," Rain countered, the heavy warmth of Silas's coat still a ghost on her shoulders, though she had long since discarded it. "Your client is no longer your concern." Kincaid steepled her fingers. "Here is the offer. It is the only one you will get. You turn over the hard drive you and Miss Monroe acquired last night. You provide a sworn statement on its origin. You identify your sources, including Lieutenant Bram. In exchange, we move Noah Velez to a federal witness protection facility. We prosecute the Riverton Union using your evidence." Rain stood her ground. And you cease all contact with Silas March. Kincaid's eyes, flat and gray as the carpet, finally met hers. "You are a distraction. We want Violet, counselor. You are in the way." It was a chess game. Kincaid was offering a pawn Riverton to get to a king Silas, and sacrificing her knight Noah to do it. "No," Rain said. Kincaid blinked, visibly annoyed. "No. That's not a deal. That's a threat. I want full immunity for Noah Velez, a public retraction of the charges, and a guarantee of his safety before I give you anything. Furthermore, I want a full, independent audit of the Port Authority's camera systems, to be conducted by the Downstream Integrity Commission." Kincaid almost laughed. "You are in no position to demand policy. You are borderline obstructing a federal investigation. And you are attempting to leverage an innocent man. You moved him to state holding to scare me. It worked. I'm here, but I am not your bait." Rain leaned forward. "You want March go get him, but you will not use my client to do it. Give me my client, or the hard drive goes to the press. If you walk out that door, you're an accessory." "Then arrest me," Rain said, calling the bluff. She turned and walked out, the silence of the federal agents in the room a heavy weight behind her. She hit the street, her adrenaline crashing, her burner phone vibrated, a text, formatted like a court alert. "Case 44-901 Velez has been transferred to federal jurisdiction. Southern District of New York. Hearing scheduled 10:00 a.m. tomorrow. New judge, new file." Her blood ran cold. This was too fast. It bypassed the local courts entirely. She immediately called Jessa. "Jessa, they're moving him. They just pushed him to the Southern District. It's a power play." "Hang on," Jessa's voice crackled. "I'm checking the federal docket. Rain, there's no Velez case on the Southern District docket. Not tomorrow, not next week." "What, I'm looking at the alert." "Rain, listen to me. Who sent the alert? I'm checking the clerk's office database. There is no deputy clerk by that name. The order is fake. Rain, it's not a legal transfer. It's an extraction. Riverton is planning to hit the transport while he's being moved." Before Rain could even breathe, her other phone rang, the one she had used to call the burner. Blocked ID, Silas. "They're taking him," he said. His voice was calm but threaded with a new urgency. "I know. It's a fake transfer. Riverton is setting up an ambush." "They are," Silas confirmed. "They believe he's being moved to a federal safe house in Lower Manhattan. They plan to intercept the convoy on the Manhattan Bridge. They will not leave witnesses." "We have to warn NOCB," Rain said, her mind racing. "Kincaid will not believe you. She will assume it's a trap, that we are trying to ambush her." He paused. "But she also cannot ignore a credible threat. She will have surveillance on that bridge. She will be watching. Riverton thinks they are setting a trap. We will let them walk into one of their own." "What do you mean?" "I mean, we let them come," Silas said. "My people have already, diverted Mr. Velez. He's not in state holding. He's safe. The convoy Riverton is planning to hit will be empty, a shadow route. We will let Riverton expose themselves to Kincaid's cameras." Rain stopped, the moral calculus shifting. "No, that's not enough. They'll just scatter. It will be a firefight. People will get hurt." She shut her eyes, making the demand. "We do this clean. No one on your team fires a single shot. We do this transparently. I want them caught with the evidence, not in a gun battle." There was a long silence on the line. She could hear him weighing the options. "Agreed," Silas said, his voice decisive. "No shots. I have a better way. Riverton is moving another container tonight, a replacement shipment. They're routing it over the same bridge, using the ambush as a diversion to get their product through. So we hit the truck." "No," Silas said. "We don't touch it. We simply give it a mechanical failure. At the apex of the bridge, right where Kincaid's cameras will be. And my team will install 4 magnetic hard locks on the container doors. Locks so strong they can't be opened without a blowtorch. We will strand the evidence in the middle of the bridge and let the police open it themselves on live television." The plan clicked into place, brilliant and terrifying. "I have work to do," Rain said. "First," she called Jess's editor at the newspaper, "I have an anonymous tip. A major drug shipment disguised as relief goods is moving over the Manhattan Bridge just after midnight. You'll want a helicopter." Second, she called Agent Kincaid. "You want Riverton Manhattan Bridge. Midnight, they're moving a container. I suggest you bring your cameras and a search warrant." Kincaid, trapped by the tip, could not afford to ignore it. Third, Rain walked into the office of the New York County District Attorney, bypassing NOCB entirely. She sat down with an assistant district attorney she trusted. "I am in possession of evidence related to an ongoing criminal enterprise at the Brooklyn ports," Rain said, placing the hard drive on the desk. "I am submitting it to you, along with this signed affidavit detailing the circumstances of its acquisition, to ensure a clean chain of custody." She signed the memorandum. The data from the pier was no longer a secret. It was legal. It was admissible. The trap was set. The sound of helicopter blades beat against the midnight air, a rhythmic thwop, thwop, thwop that vibrated in Rain's chest. She stood on the Brooklyn side of the Manhattan Bridge, blending into the shadows of the pedestrian walkway, watching the stage Silas had set. It was just after midnight. Below on the bridge deck, the NOCB convoy, the decoy meant to draw Riverton's fire, moved slowly, deliberately. Agent Kincaid was in a mobile command van 200 yards behind. Her team spread out, every agent tense, expecting an ambush. They were watching their own trap, completely unaware they were actors in a much larger one. High above, the news helicopter Rain had summoned circled, its spotlight cutting the darkness. Then it came. A heavy 18-wheeler truck, its trailer emblazoned with the logo of a generic international food aid charity, rumbled onto the bridge. It was Riverton's replacement shipment. It moved to pass the slow-moving NOCB convoy. As it reached the exact center of the bridge, directly under the glare of the news chopper's light, the truck's engine sputtered. It coughed a plume of black smoke, lurched, and died. The domino had fallen. Traffic ground to a halt. Horns blared, the news helicopter zoomed in. "We have a developing situation on the Manhattan Bridge," a reporter's voice crackled from a radio in a nearby police car. "A major transport truck has broken down, completely blocking westbound traffic." Kincaid's voice ripped over the NOCB channel, furious. "What the hell is this? Clear that truck!" But the driver was already out, hands up, shrugging uselessly. Simultaneously, at the bridge's entrance, Riverton's other team, the armed men in 3 black SUVs who had been waiting to ambush the fake convoy, saw their plan collapse. The bridge was blocked. Police, diverted by the traffic jam, were suddenly swarming the approach. They panicked. The lead SUV threw itself into a U-turn. A dark, unmarked van slid silently from an alley, blocking its path. A heavy spike strip unrolled across the asphalt. The SUV's tires hissed, deflating instantly. The other two vehicles slammed on their brakes before they could react. Uniformed NYPD, responding to the gridlock, surrounded them. It was over in 10 seconds. No shots fired, no violence, just a quiet, efficient capture. Silas was nowhere to be seen. His work was just a shadow. Back on the bridge, Kincaid was trapped. She was on live television. She had Rain's tip, and now she had the truck. "Open it," Kincaid ordered her team. An agent tried the container doors. "They're locked, boss, heavy." They produced bolt cutters. The metal snapped uselessly against 4 heavy, circular locks Rain had never seen before. They were not padlocks. They were magnetic seals. "Get the torch," Kincaid yelled, her face a mask of fury, humiliated on camera. It took 5 agonizing minutes, a shower of sparks illuminating the bridge. Finally, the locks were severed. The heavy doors swung open. The news camera pushed in. At first, it was just sacks of food aid, but NOCB agents, now desperate, tore them open. The white powder spilled out, and behind the front wall of sacks, the camera caught it all. A portable pill press, plastic-wrapped molds, and a black duffel bag, which an agent ripped open. Bundles of cash spilled onto the truck bed, and with them, a leather-bound logbook. The camera zoomed, a perfect, clear shot. As an agent opened it, the news anchor went silent. The city saw it, Gregor Kopechny's name, next to a list of seal numbers, Silas's final, damning touch. Rain's hands were shaking, clamped to the freezing metal railing. Her burner phone vibrated. A single text, blocked ID. "Well done, counselor." She let out a breath she had been holding for days. Jessa ran up beside her, grabbing her arm, her face ecstatic. They got it all. Live Rain, it's over. We're dropping the podcast right now. Pier 47B, the blind container. The whole city is gonna know." Rain nodded, leaning heavily on her friend as Jessa celebrated. Rain's other phone buzzed, a text from a federal marshal, a contact Silas had quietly provided. "Asset rerouted via tunnel. Secure. Package is safe." Noah was safe. The first impossible knot was finally undone. The rest of the night was a blur. The podcast went live, and the city's underbelly was exposed, fueled by the live broadcast and Rain's notarized affidavit. The DA's office moved. At 3 a.m., Rain stood in a near-empty courtroom and watched a weary judge grant Noah Velez bail. He was released into the custody of his weeping mother. Free. Rain was winning. She got back to her apartment as the sky was turning a bruised purple. She was exhausted, but she was, for the first time, victorious. She opened her laptop. One new email sat in her anonymous inbox. The subject line was blank. The port inspector was a pawn. The logbook was a plant. "You're aiming at the wrong man. The real master is City Finance Commissioner Vale Arden." The relief evaporated, replaced by a cold dread. Vale Arden, a man who sat on the board of every major charity in the city, a man Rain had seen shaking hands with the mayor, a man who, she realized with a sickening lurch, was the co-founder of the March and Vale Foundation. The second wave was here. The true master of the game was not just in the government. He was Silas's partner, Vale Arden. The name hung in the air of Rain's apartment, heavier and more toxic than the city smog. This was not a gang war. This was a political conspiracy. To go after Vale Arden was not like going after Riverton. Arden was not a thug. He was an institution, woven into the very fabric of the city's finances. To accuse him would be to declare war on the establishment itself. And Rain knew, with a chilling certainty, that Arden would not use street soldiers to fight back. He would use the police. He would use the federal government. He would use every lever of power to crush not just her, but his partner Silas. Exposing Arden would force Silas into a corner, forcing the Violet Syndicate to fight the entire system. Blood would be shed, not in dark alleys, but on the sunlit steps of City Hall. Her burner phone rang. "Silas." "He was my partner," Silas said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "He co-founded the foundation. He used its legitimacy, its routes, its very name, to wash his money and hide his influence. He was your cover, Rain said, the accusation sharp. He was my blind spot, Silas corrected. And now he's your target, but if you go at him directly, Rain, you will unleash a storm you cannot control. He will burn the whole city down to protect himself. So what? Rain shot back. We let him go. We let him sit on charity boards while he funnels fentanyl into the country. No, Silas said. We give him the third path. Not your way and not mine. The law. You have a contact, a law professor, someone you trust at the federal level. You will leak the file on Vale Arden, the one I am sending you to an independent grand jury, not to Kincaid, not to the DA. You will go over their heads. You will let a body with subpoena power, one he cannot control, unravel him. It keeps my people out of it. It keeps you clean. Before she could process this, her office line rang. It was Mara Kincaid. I heard you had a productive night, counselor. Kincaid's voice was clipped, furious. You made me look like a fool on live television. I got you your bust, agent. You got me a truck. I want the man who set the stage. I want Silas March. Kincaid paused, her voice shifting, offering a different kind of bait. We know about Vale Arden. We've known for months. We just couldn't get to him. March can. What are you offering? Rain asked, her blood running cold. Conditional immunity. March testifies. He gives us the syndicate's accounting records. He gives us Arden. He gives us the whole network. In exchange, he gets a reduced sentence, maybe even relocation. It is. Kincaid whispered. The only chance he has. You're smart, Alvarez. Convince him. It's the only way he gets out of this alive. The abandoned church of St. Lucent stood in a forgotten corner of Red Hook, its windows boarded, its congregation long since moved on. Dust motes danced in the cinematic beams of sunlight that pierced the collapsed roof. Rain found Silas sitting in the front pew, staring at a flaking fresco of the Archangel Michael. They want you to testify, Rain said, her voice echoing in the vast, empty space. Kincaid is offering a deal. Immunity, if you give them everything. Vale Arden, the syndicate. Silas looked at her, his face unreadable in the shifting light. And what do you want, Rain? I want the truth, all of it. He nodded slowly. I have blood on my hands. I've hurt people. I've built an empire on leveraging the city's corruption. I never pretended otherwise. The fire, Rain pressed, sitting beside him on the hard wooden bench. Tell me. The bribe money, he began, his voice low, flowed directly from Vale Arden to Gregor Kopechny. Arden was using Riverton to run his side business, using my ports to do it. The fire, yes, was set by Riverton to destroy the evidence, but... He hesitated, and Rain felt her stomach drop. But, he continued, I knew about it. Weeks before, my people had flagged Riverton's insurance activity. They were planning to torch the building, and I let them. More than that, I used my own network to manipulate the insurance derivatives. When that warehouse burned, Riverton lost a container, but the asset freeze that followed cost them nearly $200 million. I used their own crime as a financial weapon against them. Rain recoiled. This was not the clean narrative she had built. He had not just stopped a greater evil. He had profited from the chaos. Noah, she whispered, the name catching in her throat. His innocence. It was just collateral, a tool you used to bankrupt your rivals. It was, Silas admitted, and the honesty was more brutal than a lie. He looked at his hands. He was a piece on the board, a piece I knew you would protect. Rain stood, shaking with a cold, profound anger. She had been a piece, too. If you need to destroy me to end this, Rain, Silas said, rising to face her. Do it. Give Kincaid the testimony. Take the deal. Bury me to get to Arden. I will not stop you. She looked at him. The mafia boss, the philanthropist, the man who had saved her, lied to her, and now was offering her his own head. The moral lines were so blurred they no longer existed. All the anger, the betrayal, the fear, and the terrifying, undeniable pull she felt toward him, it all crested at once. She did not slap him. She did not yell. She grabbed the front of his shirt, pulled him toward her, and kissed him. It was not the slow, confirming kiss from the rooftop. This was desperate. It was a kiss of anger and grief, a raw, painful, and deeply sweet collision. It was the taste of dust, old wood, and a shared, impossible burden. It was a goodbye kiss, a final act before the world came crashing down, a last selfish claim on the man she could neither save nor condemn. He did not just receive it, he answered it. His hands came up, framing her face, his grip firm, pulling her deeper. It was a kiss that said everything they could not, the regret, the longing, the what if. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. Rain rested her forehead against his, their breath mingling in the dusty light. "Truth first," she whispered, her voice thick. "Us later, if there is a later." "Truth first," he agreed. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, encrypted hard drive. "This is not for Kincaid. This is for your grand jury." "What is it?" "My accounting ledger. All of it. It will not be enough to destroy the syndicate. The organization is designed to survive me, but it contains the one thing you need, the unwashable money trail. Every wire transfer, every offshore account, every bribe that flows from Vale Arden's name to his network." He was not giving her the sword to destroy him. He was giving her the scalpel to excise the tumor. He was trusting her to see the difference. Rain took the drive. This was her choice. Not Kincaid's deal. Not Silas's war. The third path. "I'm taking it to the grand jury," she said, her voice finding its strength. "All of it. The pier, Riverton, Vale, and this. We are ending this in a courtroom. Silas. Not with a gun." The air in the federal courthouse, Southern District, was pressurized. This was not the tired, varnish-smelling room of Kings County. This was a chamber of power, all granite, dark wood, and hushed. Expensive silence. The gallery was standing room only. At the defense table sat Vale Arden, looking bored and immaculate, flanked by a team of lawyers who billed by the minute what Rain earned in a month. The assistant UES, attorney, the man Rain had handed the validated evidence to, was methodically building his case. He presented the wire transfer data from Silas's ledger, now independently verified. He showed the forensic analysis of the container's contents. He played Noah Velez's clear, calm testimony as a protected witness. He even called Agent Mara Kincaid to the stand, forcing her to confirm, under oath, the chain of custody for the bridge evidence. Jess's podcast, having gone viral, was entered as contextual public record. Arden's lead counsel, a man with silver hair and a silk voice, rose for his cross-examination. "Agent Kincaid," he began, "is it not true that your entire investigation was prompted by tips from an anonymous source?" "We received tips from many sources," Kincaid replied, rigid. "And is it not true that this source, this whistleblower," he said the word with contempt, "is, in fact, Rain Alvarez, the known associate of a rival criminal enterprise?" The prosecutor objected. The judge overruled. The lawyer turned to the jury. "The source of this entire case is polluted. It is fruit from a poisonous tree. The data was not found. It was planted by the Violet Syndicate to eliminate a competitor. And Miss Alvarez," he gestured to Rain, "is not a whistleblower. She is their agent." The courtroom murmured. All eyes turned to Rain. Rain stood. "Your Honor, I request permission to speak, not only as counsel for Mr. Velez, whose reputation has been egregiously harmed, but as the individual who presented this evidence to the state." The judge nodded. "Proceed, Miss Alvarez." Rain walked to the lectern, her file in hand. She was not the frantic public defender from that first day. She was cold, precise, and absolute. "Counsel for the defense is correct," she said, shocking the room. "The initial tip did come from a compromised source. I never hid that. which is why I did not present that source to the prosecution. She looked at the jury. I presented them with facts, and I insisted on a clean chain of custody. Let's look at Exhibit 42, the financial audit. This was not provided by a source. This was conducted by an independent forensic accounting firm, under court order. Using the international banking records Vale Arden himself signs off on as finance commissioner. The money is there. That is not a tip. That is a fact. She continued, piece by piece, separating Silas's leads from the independently verifiable proof. She proved that the evidence stood on its own, regardless of who had pointed the way. Arden's lawyer saw he was losing. He played his final card. Then let's talk about the evidence, he boomed. A final exhibit, Your Honor. He produced a document, a recovered email from the Violet Syndicate, ordering its men to install hard locks on that container on the bridge. This was not an investigation. It was a setup. She, he pointed at Rain, manipulated a federal scene to frame Mr. Arden. The room gasped. This was a damning blow. Rain's hands gripped the lectern. She looked to the gallery, finding Silas. He was standing in the back, just a man in the crowd. He met her gaze. He did not look away. He gave a single, slow nod. It's true. Now end it. Rain turned back to the judge. Her voice was quiet, but it carried across the entire room. The voice from the rooftop. Counsel is correct again. That measure was taken. Aha! Arden's lawyer shouted. A measure, Rain continued, silencing him, that prevented a high-speed chase through civilian traffic, a measure that stopped a gun battle between Riverton and the NOCB, a measure that forced the truth to be exposed, not in a dark alley but on live television, where it could not be buried. She stepped away from the lectern, facing the judge and jury. We talk about the fruit of a poisonous tree, but what happens when the orchard itself is rotten? What happens when the corruption is so deep that the only way to get the truth is to force it into the light? She looked at Vale Arden. That action prevented violence. It saved lives. I asked the court what is the moral cost of a technical infraction when the alternative is a massacre. The judge was silent, his face grim. He looked at the U.S. attorney. I want to see the footage from the bridge. Now. The lights dimmed. The courtroom watched the replay. They saw the truck. They saw the sparks as NOCB struggled with the locks. They saw the doors swing open. They saw the pill press. They saw the duffel bag of cash and the logbook. The motive for the manipulation was suddenly, starkly, clear. The judge read the finding from the independent grand jury. Based on the overwhelming and independently verified evidence, this jury finds sufficient cause to indict Commissioner Vale Arden and the known associates of the Riverton Union for conspiracy, drug trafficking, and public corruption. A roar went up. Arden's face turned the color of ash. Furthermore, the judge continued, the jury calls for a separate investigation into the operations of the Violet Syndicate. However, it grants priority and consideration for any and all cooperative testimony regarding public corruption. Before the gavel could fall, a lawyer Rain did not recognize stood up. Your Honor, my client, Silas March, wishes to submit a sworn affidavit. He accepts the offer to testify fully against Mr. Arden and the corruption within the city's financial infrastructure. Silas himself stepped forward from the gallery. He was not surrendering his organization. He was sacrificing his king to save the board. He looked once at Rain, his gaze clear. Truth first. It was done. Marshals moved, and the clicking of handcuffs on Vale Arden's wrists was the loudest sound in the room. Across the aisle, Noah Velez, finally and truly free, was sobbing in his mother's arms. Rain stood still, the adrenaline draining from her body, and felt a single, hot tear roll down her cheek. She was smiling. Outside, the city was a chaotic rush of news vans and traffic. He was waiting on the broad stone steps, just as she knew he would be. No guards, no sleek black car, just Silas. I will be gone for a while, he said, the noise of the city swirling around them, the deposition process. I have to finish my part. Rain did not hesitate. In front of the cameras, the agents, and the entire city, She walked up to him. She slipped her hand into his. Their eyes met, a silent, binding promise. She rose on her toes, and he met her halfway. They kissed. It was not the desperate, pained kiss from the church. It was short, deep, and restrained. It was a promise of a future, earned through law and impossible choices. The shout, "He's innocent," had saved one man, but it had also forced a guilty one into the light. And their story, a love forged in the gray spaces between law and crime, was just beginning, written against the dawn of a city that could finally breathe. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below, share your thoughts, and let's connect. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give it a boost by hitting the hype button. It helps get this story out to more listeners just like you.